Welcome to Save That Pig!
Save That Pig, the greatest game show that you will ever see on the internet. Save That Pig is where we take three pigs, put them behind a curtain door, and you have to pick which pig you're gonna save. Yvonne,
the others become local celebrities until they are butchered to help feed the homeless.
Well, hey, someone's got to eat the pigs or else they're just dying. Pigs are a great commodity, and I honestly think that we should all eat more pork instead of beef.
Okay, well, 3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome to the Hungover podcast. Now that we've gotten our silliness out of the way, my name's Ivan over there.
Julien, welcome to the show.
And if you are tuning in right now, you could be tuning in a multitude of ways. If you're tuning in live, you're tuning in on Twitch, which we stream on twitch.tv/JujuBeesGood, also auto-hosted on mine/ConradBoyar.
Mm-hmm.
And we have also the ability to watch in video form on YouTube, but you can listen to it in sound form on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment on iTunes. It takes a little bit out of your day, but helps us get further out there in the long distance of the cold, dark night that is the internet and podcasting landscape.
Podcast services around the globe. You can get us.
We should get on to more, but until we do, we're going to explain to you the thing that we start our show with every week, which is what you consume during the week. Or what you drink last night.
Vaughn, let me tell you, I drank some water because I was feeling a little crazy on my stream. All right, I had this weird chest pain going on last night. Woke me up at 6 a.m. It was a weird. It felt like I had a really sore chest. As if you were, doing the
lifting?
dumbbell and shit. But I had not done that at all last week, so I was confused as to why I had a really sore chest, and then I took some painkillers like ibuprofen, and it all went away. So I'm not going to question it, and I just drink water. But I'll tell you another thing I did, aside from media consumption, which I'd like to get to for sure. But I went to, on Friday night, Nikki, my lovely girlfriend, took me out on a fancy date to a gala because her company is a very rich what's it called, a construction company, so they get invited, or their boss gets invited to a bunch of these fancy events, fundraiser type things, and as a consequence she gets invited as well, which is pretty nice because she's not necessarily very high up in the company, but that's really cool because I get to go as well. So this one was for Al Schroeder. I don't know if you know the name. He's a very famous. He's just retiring now. He's a very famous guy in New York City, at least when it comes to air duct work and heating and cooling systems. So he's
HVAC is the
HVAC. That's the correct one. So he's pretty much responsible for all of us being able to breathe in New York City inside buildings, which is pretty cool, and he's a very famous engineer, I believe. So he's retiring, and they threw a gala for him, and I got to go, which means I got to drink.
Nice.
I had a nice, what was it called? It was a Sauvignon Blanc. It's a little sweet, but a catering company is going to choose the cheapest but still palatable wine that they can pick. So fine. I drank a couple of those, and then I had an Abita Purple Haze. I don't know if you ever had that beer, Ivan.
It is the classic Abita drink.
I think it's pretty good, personally. It's not... It's very... I think it's good for hot weather, hot, humid weather, as we've been getting in New York City lately. So I picked it up. It was pretty good. We went to a bar after. It was pretty nice.
No Brooklyn Summer Ale?
They didn't have it at the bar, or that I saw on tap. So I do like Brooklyn Summer Ale. That is one of my favorite things to drink in the summer, for sure. aside from a mojito.
Super refreshing.
It's a very refreshing beer. And also, they have a really cool colored label pastel blue. It's a nice label on the, if you're getting it in a bottle, of course, and of course
It's
in
like
the
the
can.
London Spitfire blue.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's really appealing for a summer drink. I think they hired the right person to design that label. They'll sell a lot this summer. We'll see. But yeah, aside from that, that was pretty fun. I guess the woman, they hired this cover band to do the music for the gala, and the woman who was the singer of the band, she was, aside from being incredibly attractive, she had this really cool she had pink hair, dyed of course, and they covered a wide breadth of songs. So they started out the night with some R&B hits and things like RESPECT.
Nice. Get the crowd going.
And At Last,
give the people what they want.
So I just wanted to point her out because she had the breadth of range to cover At Last by Etta James, and ending, well, by the time we left, she was singing Work from Rihanna. And that is impressive to me.
That is
or
a
whatever the name of that song
portfolio.
Is. Yeah. And she did it. I was pretty impressed. It's not like she was fucking up the songs, so that's good. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out. The other thing I did was, the two things that I watched, I mean, usually I'm the video game guy, but today I've got some movies to talk about, or at least one movie to talk about. I watched the fifth in a long series of movies known as Pirates of the Caribbean. I finally watched it.
Our resident Pirates of the Caribbean expert.
I am actually a Pirates of the Caribbean expert, except for the fourth one, which I did see, but I don't understand how it fits into the storyline. So 1, 2, and 3 have a story arc, right? Beginning, middle, and end, where we have Orlando Bloom becoming whatever Davy Jones' locker, jockstrap or whatever he is in the fucking locker. So he's cursed. And then we have the fourth one where Penelope Cruz is in there. And I think Johnny Depp they do the same. Whatever. I don't care about this stunt.
The only important thing is that Penelope Cruz is pretty great looking in that movie.
She's gorgeous. But yeah, they didn't have Keira Knightley in that one. And this movie,
she got too expensive.
She did. She's very popular and gorgeous. But Penelope Cruz is whatever. Anyways, so the fifth one, called Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Men Tell No Lies, or Tell No Tales. Sorry, Tales. That makes more sense. Has Javier Bardem in it as the Captain Salazar, and they would only allow him to say hombre and and hola in Spanish. Those are the only two Spanish words they would allow him to say. So funny. And then I believe if you watch the trailer, oh boy, green screen malfunctioning. Sorry about that. It's a live show. It's a changing dynamic of the light. But if you, and fuck it, we'll go into full spoilers for a movie that no one saw and came out last year. This, I believe, if you watch the trailer, which I watched during the Super Bowl last year, or maybe, yeah, last year, and then I said, oh, I kind of want to watch that movie. Completely forgot about it. Didn't see it until now. And then if you watch that trailer again, I believe there were a lot of scenes that are cut out from that trailer. Don't quote me on that one, but I think so. Anyways.
You think that's a positive?
I think I feel like it was a negative. Because they're okay, so this movie centers around two new characters that they introduced. Now we have a 4-movie-long series that has built up all these really cool characters like Johnny Depp, Jack Sparrow, and Captain Barbossa, Jeffrey Rush. I think Jeffrey Rush is amazing as Captain Barbossa. I don't care what you say. I think he's really awesome pirate, and especially in the first two, at least. In this one, I think he's taken on more of a larger role. He's taken over. He sort of has a pirate company, and he's become very rich. And I think he has some really good scenes in this movie. I'm not going to lie. He's always good. And then Johnny Depp, I feel like he was just, I don't know. He didn't have as many scenes. So basically what I'm trying to say is
CGI young Johnny Depp?
That was another thing that I was curious about. There's a scene where they tell the origins of Johnny Depp's character Captain Jack Sparrow, where and the whole reason why the bad guy Javier Bardem, Captain Salazar, is trying to kill Johnny Depp is because Johnny Depp ends up pulling this sick bootleg turn and sending Captain Salazar into the void of death triangle or wherever the fuck he was going. Anyways, the point was here, all right? So we have Javier Bardem, we have Johnny Depp, we have Jeffrey Rush, these amazing actors, right? Or at least Johnny Depp's sort of on the tail end of his career, let's be honest. But these two actors are pretty good, and they're really the stars of the show. But the movie continues to focus on these two new characters that they bring in, which I don't know the name of. Let me look them up. Caribbean 5, IMDb. Wikipedia, we've got I'm sorry. Basically what I was trying to say is the movie tries to focus on this love story between these two characters that they introduce in this movie, played by Brenton Thwaites and Kaya Scoladario. Scoladario. Scodelario. Yeah. Anyways, so basically those two people suck. Javier Bardem, Jeffrey Rush, and Johnny Depp are awesome because they're established characters that are really cool, and they're all really cool pirates. And then they have Orlando Bloom just in the beginning of the movie and then at the end of the movie, the last scene of the movie, because we're going to full spoilers. I don't care anymore. And then they bring in Elizabeth Swann, what's her name? Keira Knightley at the very last scene as well, because they managed to break his curse on being Davy Jones' jockstrap. All right, so the movie sucked, but Jeffrey Rush, Johnny Depp, and Javier Bardem have some pretty cool scenes, so maybe worth a watch. A lot of it is CG, of course.
Can I ask you a question?
Sorry. Okay, yeah.
Do you think Orlando Bloom in this movie or Anthony Hopkins in Thor Ragnarok, who do you think they had on set for longer? Considering, honestly, I would have to say Anthony Hopkins, because, dude, Orlando Bloom's in this movie for a sum total of 2 minutes max. I'm not kidding. And I actually liked his character in the first 3 movies. My point is, what I do like about this movie is I a couple times when I was watching, I'm like, how did they think of this fight scene? Because they have these really crazy set pieces, and they spend a lot of money on these movies. They have all these ridiculous things that Johnny Depp is doing while he's like trying to weasel his way in and throughout, getting fired at by cannons and things like that. There are a lot of cool fight scenes in the movie, and I think it's and the intro scene is really cool as well. They're trying to rob a bank, and so their plan was to strap the safe in the bank to a horse carriage. Did they Fast and the Furious this?
Pretty much. And basically those ropes went through a building, and so the horse is in the back of the building. They basically start running with the horse, and the safe ends up going to the back of the building, hits the wall, and then it unhinges the entire building from the foundation, and they just race through this entire town in St. Martin, whatever time period is, with the entire bank on the back of these horses. And I thought that was a pretty cool scene. A lot of it seemed a little, I don't know how practical it was in terms of how they filmed it, but it was actually a pretty entertaining scene. Yeah, and the music's great too. I like the Pirates of the Caribbean filmography. I think it's a fun franchise, but this movie was a little lackluster when it comes to, unfortunately, they had such a great cast. Why did they introduce these two stupid characters that suck? That's all I'm saying. The other thing I watched but fell asleep during was a Comedy Central comedy. There's a reason why I don't watch movies. No, I'm kidding. I started watching it at 1 a.m. That's why I fell asleep during it. But Hari Kondabolu, the guy who did The Problem with Apu thing, I watched his stand-up special on Netflix last night. I thought it was relatively funny. It seemed some of the jokes seemed a little like he clearly scripted, but so some of the jokes which seemed like, in terms, if you just looked at what he said on paper, it would seem to have been reactionary to the crowd, but the way he said them made it seem like they were clearly scripted in his act. I mean, you have to watch it to understand what I'm saying, I guess, maybe.
I think I would.
Yeah, I think it's worth a watch. He talks a lot about, as you can imagine, since he did The Problem with Apu, racism towards brown people in America, things like that. And he talks a lot about Trump, of course, and growing up as an immigrant, second generation immigrant in America. I think it's worth a shot if you have nothing else to do, as I did at 1 a.m. last night. And it was pretty funny. I was just really tired.
I'm surprised you're able to stay up to 1 a.m. These days, I can't do it.
These days, right?
Can't do it,
man. Getting too old.
Getting too
but
old
that's
for this stuff.
And then I played Yakuza and Tekken 7. But that's what I did. How about you, Ivan?
Well, yesterday I went to the Salt City Barbecue Festival.
Yeah, how was that?
Because I live in Syracuse and there was a barbecue festival. So it was a long festival. It stretched from like noon to 11. Mm-hmm. And we went there in the late evening. We got there around between 7:30 and 8, so cool. Towards the end of the night. And I kid you not, there were about 20 people there.
Awkward.
There were more people who were involved in the cooking process than attendees at that point.
So you got a lot of BBQ then.
It wasn't free, so no.
Never mind. That sucks. That's interesting. Why?
We got a cheaper admission. Here's the thing with what happened to me yesterday. People kept stealing like $1 from me the whole day.
What?
Yeah,
does that mean?
So we went to go in, and because it was so late and there, like half of the BBQ shops had closed down, the admissions person was like, "Okay, I'll sell you 2 tickets for the price of 1."
Okay.
So I gave her. They were supposed to be $5 a ticket, so I gave her a 20, and I get back 14. It's like, okay.
Did you question that in front of her?
I did. I was like, it's still a deal, but it's kind of weird because it's not the full deal that she had just told us. We got like a 40% discount. I was like, okay, whatever. I'm not going to argue with it. Then we go in. We walk around a little bit. They tell us the best barbecue's on the left.
Yeah.
That's mostly because everybody on the right had closed down. So we go to the left.
God damn it.
And we find the People's Choice Award winner. So we pay for our barbecue. They're like, it's $30 even.
What?
We got 3 different dishes. Okay. I got a Texas hot link, pulled pork nachos, and half a rack of ribs plus 2 sides.
Sounds really good. I could go for some BBQ right now.
Yeah,
but
man.
Was it good?
It was. It's not Texas barbecue.
Yeah,
Texas barbecue takes the top.
Everything when it comes to BBQ.
It's not even that New York City place that replicates Texas barbecue. It was decent. It's not even dinosaur quality, I would say.
Really?
I think dinosaur is still better.
So that sucks. So you spent $30 there instead of dinosaur.
Yeah, but I got a lot more. The thing about dinosaur is it's way overpriced. So
Absolutely.
We got a lot more
the
food
tourist attraction
for how much money we paid.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, and plus I love nachos, so I was
Can't
happy.
complain. Look, can't complain. It's a bunch of stewed meat and things like that, and slow cooked meat. Sorry. So that's all I would ask for.
The flavors were pretty good. It wasn't
Was it too
perfect.
sweet?
No, it just wasn't. It was like, because it was towards the end of the day, it was obviously like they took it off earlier, and it wasn't. It was
It
like a
dried
little
out,
overcooked.
maybe,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was a little dried out at that point.
Okay.
So it's clearly like not the best presentation for their product.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. It was late in the day. There were like 3 people who were actually buying food at that time. So
That's
I'm not
so weird.
I'm not gonna say that they were the worst. But they just told me it was $30. It was actually $29. And they
Uh-huh.
stole $1 from me.
What the
So
fuck?
again, this is the second time within 15 minutes that
You're
$1 has
getting
been
duped.
taken from me.
Oh my god.
We're like,
Correct.
and there was this poor girl who was singing there, and she's super brave because she's up there, she's singing, she's doing her show for about 10 people who are sitting on those tables right in front of her,
Mhm.
and she's going through it, she's singing live. She's
Kinda
got
like
a
us.
guitar, but she's
Right now.
also got like backing music that she plays off of a CD.
Mm-hmm. Those
So it
sound
was-
great.
It was a weird combo. Anyway, she was okay.
Okay.
So
So
she
you
did
gave her
a
$1.
mix of covers and original songs, and she did a lot of like spoken word rapish interludes in the middle of like chorus, and I gotta say it was pretty cringy. I had a hard time.
Well, you're getting too old. You don't like the new kid, the hip music for the kids, all right? That's just how
Apparently
it
not.
is.
In any case, we left there. We went to see Deadpool 2.
Nice.
And there was a break in the time, so we were like, let's grab a beer. So when we went to get a beer, I gave her a $20 bill. I got my change back only in singles, like only in the dollar bills, like a 5. It was a 4. It was like I should have gotten coin change. She gave me no coin change, only the bill. And I was like, well, fuck. Everybody's stealing from me today. I was going to use it towards your tip and probably over-tip you, but at this point, I'm going to say that was used towards your tip and under-tip you.
Wow.
But Laura ended
Scum
up giving
lords.
$1, so that everything worked out.
Scum lords.
That's what
fucking
I'm saying.
nickel and diamond him, and that's this guy contributes back to society as a teacher, right? Don't nickel and dime him. What are you doing? He's getting nickel and dimed.
Pay me back, life. Anyway, so then we went to saw Deadpool 2. My review of Deadpool 2 is basically it's it doesn't feel as fresh or as interesting as Deadpool 1.
Mm-hmm.
But if you like Deadpool 1, you'll like Deadpool 2. It's
Okay.
just not as much.
I like the
It's
first
like-
one.
If Deadpool 1 is kind of like a 9 out of 10, Deadpool 2 is probably like a 6.5 to 7 out of 10.
Man, that sucks.
But it's mostly stems from the fact that there's no breaks, there's not a lot of timing. It feels much more like it's a joke every like 10 seconds or less.
That's what you
So-
wanted. You wanted the Marvel movies to be funny.
I wanted them to be funny, but Thor Ragnarok is funnier.
Yeah. Oh, really? Then
Yeah.
Deadpool too. Huh. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
So like there need to be to maximize the scale of funny, you need some level of like pause. And there's no level of pause in Deadpool 2. It's just like joke, 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 joke.
That's
joke,
pretty
joke,
out of
joke,
control.
Joke, joke, joke. For the entire movie. So
That's crazy.
there are actually some like moments where it hangs in terms of seriousness.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels more out of place than natural, and it's like it could have been tongue in cheek over the like with how it regards those serious movements, but it isn't. It's like it transitions to 2 different kinds of movies.
I see.
But it's still pretty interesting. There are a few jokes that are pretty hilarious. So I think in general, it's If you like the first Deadpool, it's definitely worth seeing. If you didn't like the first Deadpool, stay away from it because it's more of the same.
Okay. Well, that's their brand when it comes to Deadpool. It's the rated R. Is this one rated R as well?
Yeah.
It's the rated R version of Marvel Cinematic Universe that will never cross over except for it was Cable. Who was in the first Deadpool movie? It was two X-Men, I thought.
Colossus.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any crossover in this movie?
It's a joke in this movie that there aren't more X-Men from the other like Sony Marvel movies that are in this one.
Okay.
And it also, I think it actually deals like some movies do. It is over budgeted.
Yeah.
So there are some movies that it feels like when you give a movie too much budget, it gives too much. It's like the restriction of a budget is what helped Deadpool 1 be as interesting as it was. It was a passion project,
right.
Unlimited budget, so it had to live up to these really high expectations, and I think that there's some level of restriction in filmmaking, especially, that leads to a better product. But when you're unrestricted in terms of money and things that you can do, it makes it too open to being too jam-packed with a lot of stuff that you don't delve into, you don't explore, and you put too much in there. It's like an overstuffed sausage, you know?
Okay.
So I think that's more akin to what this movie is. They tried to put too much of a good thing into one movie, and it made it all taste a little more bland than being that succulent dish that you really wanted.
I see. Well, I'll probably skip this one. I don't know if I can see the next Deadpool. I watched the first one, but...
you can probably watch it when it comes
actually,
out to rent or whatever.
All right, I'll watch it then. Just another funny comedy movie. All right. Well, Ivan.
Yeah.
You know what's not so funny? It's the topic of the show. We're going to be talking about some DIY gene editing as it's gaining some popularity in the general populace. So we're talking about gene editing, something that's consistently researched in university labs and national labs even. Perhaps a company might fund some research being done either at a university or on their own. They have R&D departments for this. And Vaughn found this really great article in the New York Times, published on the 14th of May, 6 days ago, as we're recording this on the 20th, about a teenager who is doing this in his backyard, his garage, pretty much. Well, just in his house, let's be honest.
It's in his bedroom.
Never mind. Completely wrong on all of those fronts. In his place, where he lives. Ivan, do you want to tell us a little bit about this article?
Yeah, so basically this is an article that's introducing to the mainstream collective a group of people that are known as body hackers or biohackers. Mm-hmm. So it's a group of people who are now exploring on a private, domestic, like in the household level, the same way that you would do like a popular mechanics, like you would build your own car back in the day. Mm-hmm. So that's what they're doing with genetics. So they're able to purchase some pretty advanced equipment for a lot cheaper than it used to be, because the cost of the equipment that you use to do genetic editing has gone down tremendously over mm-hmm. time. And there is this, for instance, there's this CRISPR kit that was created by, I think it was created by this NASA scientist who's turned biohacker recently, that costs $59. So it's less advanced version of lab equipment that is used in professional labs across the country, which would, for them, it costs like upwards of $60,000.
Yeah.
But you can buy this cheap at-home version that probably isn't as extensive, but does a lot of the same processes for $159. And you can also buy DNA fragments from a variety of sites so that you can do your own DIY, do-it-yourself, gene editing and genetic testing. So all of this put together allows random people in this country or others to just take genetic material and manipulate how they want to do whatever they want to do. So the examples that were given in this article to begin with is like some people wanted to create an HPV vaccine to create something that would enhance their musculature, or to a homebrew treatment to combat HIV.
Yeah.
None of them worked, and this is just kind of talking about people who have like this half-baked idea of what to do and how to use these things, and it's a completely unregulated field, right? So if you're doing work in a lab with experiments, you have to have like IRBs. There's a lot of oversight over what you're doing. There's a lot of restriction to how you're doing the work that you do. But when you're doing the genetic experiments at home, especially if you're doing the genetic testing on yourself, this is the one space where like the laws that are in regards to experiments have the exemption, right? If you do tests on yourself, there's an exception.
Yes.
In terms of the requirements of oversight.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So, like the guy who created the treatment for ulcers, he was working in a lab. They wouldn't give him the ability to perform his experiments on others, so he gave himself an ulcer and then gave himself the treatment and was able to... he got fired from his job but won a Nobel Prize for his work in ulcers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because he was able to do a experiment on his own body. In much the same way that these genetic things you'll be able to do experiments on yourself. But the idea behind that is that like the guy who did the ulcer experiment was doing it in a genetic lab with a lot of restrictions, a lot of knowledge, versus people who are at home that don't have that kind of same thing, and it's editing at a totally different level. So ulcers, he was working with a cure because he thought bacteria caused them. Here, it's working with genetics and manipulating it. And the real scare is that you can homebrew a bioterrorist methodology, or you could homebrew something that you don't mean to disrupt anything outside, but you create, like, if you want to bioedit, like, a tomato plant or something, and then over the course of the thing that you plant it outside, and that crossbreeds with other plants, for instance, and that causes some sort of other eco-disaster. There's a lot of unregulated experimentation that could go with this DIY system, and I had no idea that it was so far in its freewheeling access that people could do this at home on pretty much a regular basis. Like $159 is less than an iPad.
That's very cheap. I'm considering buying one right now. No, I'm kidding. But definitely super, super inexpensive experiments. Not to mention, I believe I don't know exactly what sort of types of chemicals they would possibly need for this, but I can't imagine they're much more expensive than the kit itself. So, but then again, I could be wrong, right? So, and how are they getting the chemicals? I don't know. But it seems to me that they're swiftly finding that chemical research and science research is an incredibly slow process, and it's pretty much 90% failures or 99% failures. But it's every now and then you get that 1% success, which is really great. But as you were saying, it's really definitely a huge safety risk to everyone. Even though maybe this guy in the article has good intentions, that's great. But honestly, I'm like almost on the middle of the road in this. I'm glad that people are taking science into their own hands and being more curious about these types of things, and understanding the scientific method and process and way of thinking of how you even would want to do this, and honestly, he probably has good intentions. He wants to, like you said, he wants to treat HIV. Okay, that's great. Clearly, that's a horrible thing that really sucks in a lot of people's lives. But as you were saying, Yvonne, he's not well. Okay, yeah, he's not no longer is he working in a highly restricted lab with lots of regulations. It's doing everything correctly by the books. He's now doing this at his home and putting a lot of people in danger. Labs are really dangerous places, and the same goes for what he's doing. So I agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah, it's just to me it is an interesting dynamic, right? So like most of the time with scientific experiments or things like that, like material science, for instance, I like if you can do experiments at your home with material science, I think for the most part, go ahead, because the worst thing that comes from material science is you could build some sort of device that would be harmful or whatever, but it would take the amount of cost efficiency there is huge, right? So material science is a very expensive branch of science, and even if you're developing things at home, for the most part, you wouldn't have the ability to do a lot of damage over the course of time. But editing at the genetic level is so fundamentally not understood in its full breadth and scope, even at the highly restrictive level of a lot of labs. So like we can see how it works in a lab, we can see how it works on a small field, but we don't understand fully the scope of how, for instance, if you genetically engineer a grass and then it crossbreeds with natural grass, down the line, how does that affect the biosphere in that surrounding area is not especially studied. There are no really
longitudinal studies
exactly of that kind of science.
Yep.
So if we're expanding the amount of genetic editing from these massive scale laboratories, because like farming, like farm or agriculture based genetic testing is massive and huge and widespread. But if we increase that to urban areas and other areas, then the manipulation of the gene pool through all sorts of ecosystems is going to be massive. Not to mention the ability of people to genetically modify themselves is just, it's such an odd concept, and I think it's something that needs to be less than more. Like, there needs to be more restriction on it than freedom. Like,
yeah.
I understand the whole point, and you if you make it widespread, perhaps like pharmaceutical companies or other places that are doing gene mining and unfair practices will have less strength, and their position will crumble in terms of that monopoly of power in terms of gene editing on humanity. But I think as a whole group, we still don't understand a lot of the effects of editing at the genetic level, in terms of long term, in terms of short term, in terms of widespread, to be doing it at the home level.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you on that in that respect. I think it's very dangerous what they're doing, and it's dangerous to a lot of people, which is horrible. I like, let's say we were just saying we don't know if this guy has a family or anything, but let's say he was working on a strain of he's working on some sort of vaccination for HIV in this picture, right? So let's say he makes something dangerous that he thought was a cure, because I mean he's no longer working in a lab that he can test a bunch of these things. And I'm sorry, there's music playing. There's now a party outside my window, so that's going to be in our podcast. Great. Jesus, really? Fuck. I'm sorry, everyone who's listening. There's been kids playing ball outside all day, so I'm sorry. I can't change my neighborhood. But yeah, so
nor
let's
would
say,
you want to.
nor would I want to. I do
Let
love
kids
my
be
neighborhood.
kids.
Exactly. Let them have fun. And let this guy be a kid too. But he's a teenager, right? But let's say he did something harmful to his body that he didn't know could transmit to someone else, and then that transmits to someone else. That's how things break out, right? Like Ebola.
Right.
Ebola. I'm not saying he's making Ebola. He's working on whatever he thinks he's working on, right? So the other thing, and really, really getting loud, huh? Wow. But anyways, like I do want to say the counter side to this, though. Where you're saying it's dangerous and we should obviously put more regulation. I agree on that. The counter side to this is that if we put more people to the task, we're much more likely to find the solution, right? Or this is in broad terms. I'm painting with a broad stroke here. So let's say, right, we're trying to cure HIV, right? Or this guy is. Let's put everyone on that task. And I agree with you. Obviously, if we could do that in some sort of regulated way, then it would make much more sense. But then we have more people on the task that are going to be going off in all sorts of different directions. The top scientists might be thinking this is the only way we're going to cure this horrible virus and they're thinking through a funnel, just this is it. So if we take someone completely removed from the situation, the fact that maybe even has HIV, who knows, and put them on the job, maybe they're going to think in a different direction. So I see why this person's so motivated to be doing this type of thing. And not to mention, it's probably pretty fun. Let's be honest. It's fun to work with cool science stuff, right? So that's the counter argument that I could see being brought up. I don't necessarily agree with that. Obviously, this type of thing should be regulated. But maybe, as you were talking about material science, things like that, that aren't necessarily so dangerous in terms of long-term effects and things that we may not have so much research and knowledge about. Maybe material science at home is something that you could do with your kids and things like that. I don't know. But that's what I wanted to say from the other side. But I totally agree with you. Don't get me wrong.
So the amount of crowdsourcing to find a cure.
Right. Crowdsourcing to find a cure. Right. That's the best way to say it.
But as much as crowdsourcing to find a cure it might help to produce different lines of thought, right? So the experimentation, but you also... Okay, let's also contrast the amount of science education that goes on in this country. Mm-hmm. Right, so I don't... You're contracting, right, the population that is able to do this anyway, or the people. So if we're crowdsourcing it, I think that for the most part, the people who are super interested in doing the kind of experiments and doing the thoroughness... the thorough experiments to do biohacking, I think for the most part they're also drawn to the science of bioengineering, right? So wouldn't they be going down the path of being biologists and working with genetics anyway? I don't see how giving people homebrew labs is more inventive than encouraging people to enter the scientific field who are obviously inclined to do so, but can then perform experiments under the guiding hand of somebody who has more knowledge, talking through what their ideas are at a much higher level, and also with more restriction in terms of access to these kinds of things. Starting this thing as a high schooler, I don't see necessarily how a lot of high schoolers will help create the cure for HIV, for instance.
I'm not saying that an expert in the field, we'll use an HIV research as an example, doesn't know what they're talking about, but clearly they haven't cured HIV yet, right? So
Right.
I'm just saying, and I'm not saying they're not dedicating their whole lives to this, right? This is what they do in their research. I'm not saying that they don't know what they're talking about. I'm saying that it's a breath of fresh air to have someone who's completely removed from the scientific world come up and think about this in a different way. So I think a lot of scientists, I don't want to paint, again, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I think a lot of science is great. Of course, I'm currently a scientist. I'm getting my PhD in chemistry, but I see it all the time in my field, and I'm sure it pours over to other fields. Is that people get so snooty and caught up in semantics and just this is the way it is, no matter what you say, and that sort of type of mentality, and I see that firsthand. So
I mean, it's the classic application of knowledge, right? So there's an orthodox view, and then there are rebels, and the rebels can't have their view be accepted until the orthodox legion is basically retired or put out of business.
Right, that sort of mentality, right?
And this cycle of revolutionary scientific thinking occurs all the time. Like there's research. I forget who there was a scientist who basically this is what he studied, we went through this in my anthro class, my graduate anthro class. Basically, the cycle of scientific discovery and evolution of thought and things like that. So,
well, if you
can move the orthodox guard out of the way quicker by spreading it out and making things more accessible, then that could be a net positive. I'm just saying the consequences of genetic engineering are different than, let's say,
yes, of course,
other fields.
You're right. There are. I agree with what you're saying 100%, and I think what this person is doing is kind of reckless and dangerous. But that doesn't. I don't think that means that you shouldn't. I think that in this particular field, maybe we just should, nip it right there and just stop. What are you doing? Stop. But like you were saying, material science or something like that, I think that it's something that's not necessarily so dangerous to a large population. I think that can be fostered in a home lab, possibly. I think.
Yeah, I'm all for increasing the level of scientific knowledge in this country and the world. Yeah. If we can crowdsource, not crowdsourcing solutions perhaps, but increasing the amount of interest and knowledge in science in general is, I think, always a positive, unless it leads to, nuclear weapons.
Right.
But even nuclear weapons led to nuclear power and different things, so there are some hidden positives there. But super dangerous. It's really, I think it really is the fact that there are no oversights. And so, for instance, the University of Alberta created a lab at the University of Alberta created an experiment by which they recreated an extinct cousin of the smallpox virus, the horsepox.
Right.
By ordering DNA strands from all different companies and equipment and different things. And for $100,000, they recreated an extinct pox virus that, if you released it, could damage
everything.
the targets of whoever the horsepox targets. So I'm personally not very familiar. I'm not a biologist, so I don't know what the horsepox. Presumably, the horsepox targets horses, but if it could go into different, or you could create
it can mutate
a virus that could go into different animals, right? So swine flu was originally only in pigs, then transferred. Avian flu, same thing. So regardless, I think that the devastating effects of genetic engineering should be taken into account. Just the same way that we don't really allow kids to create nuclear reactors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that this should be as restricted. And like nuclear material, like there was a Boy Scout who created a nuclear reactor, right?
I think I heard about that.
And I think it was maybe in the 90s or early aughts.
Yeah.
So he created a nuclear reactor in his backyard. But he came quickly under the investigation of the FBI. Meanwhile, the people who do this kind of homebrew genetic engineering have no contact from authorities, and I think that this is something that goes so far under the radar that a lot of people aren't even thinking about this in terms of bioterrorism or the just a accident that could lead to a catastrophic event.
Yeah, no, it's clearly this can go south very quickly, and if the FBI if they're not on the radar now, like what the hell is the FBI doing? The New York Times is writing about this. This was in last week's New York Times, the most popular newspaper for people who live in New York and around the world. But I guess most popular newspaper doesn't mean much anymore. But yeah, so clearly these guys haven't done anything catastrophic yet, but I agree with what you're saying. It can go south real quick.
The other thing is that they've been like mostly 0% successful with anything that they've done.
Yeah.
So what is really the harm
Thank
of people
God.
who don't know how to do anything, doing things
This guy
like
knows
putting
what he's doing.
energy and effort into things that will lead to zero results anyway? So it required a high-level laboratory to recreate the horse box.
Yeah.
So these idiots who are doing DIY homebrew and genetic engineering and attempting to make themselves the Hulk or whatever and are 0% successful, like, what is the harm in letting them do things that literally change nothing?
No,
It's basically like
Shut the
levels
shit
of doing, like, trying to create what is that old-timey elixirs that healed you or whatever?
Or snake oil.
Yeah, so these are basically snake oil creators,
Salesman,
right?
yeah.
These are
Not
the
selling yet, but-
alchemists of the modern day alchemists, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of people who are trying to turn lead into gold or whatever.
Yeah.
These are the same kinds of people that are trying to do this genetic editing to try and take basic materials and turn them into $1 million ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're unable to do it mostly because they don't have the expertise, the full equipment, or again, I'm going to go back to basically the basic training. Now, you take some high-level people who have like PhDs in this, and then they get the homebrew set, then I'll be like, they need to be under FBI supervision.
Yep.
But until then, like, I'm not worried about a 19-year-old.
They
doing
spent
much.
a lot of money. What's going on in this picture here in this Times article? All these pipettes are really expensive. I know that. So I guess they spent more money than you would think. It looks like they have a lot of supplies in the background. They even have looks like they have a refrigerator or something. A lab grade refrigerator. That's pretty expensive. So I assume this is the company. Let's read.
This is a different company.
Oh, this is a lab in
GenSpace.
Brooklyn. Okay.
So this is Daniel Grushkin.
Okay, sorry. Never mind.
So he's a different guy than what we've been talking about. He
Is
is
a
a guy
startup
who,
lab or something?
yeah,
In Brooklyn.
and he reached out to
I
the
know where that
FBI
is.
himself.
I see.
So it's like a little bit more restrictive in what they do. So like his community guidelines are no infectious agents in the lab and
Sunset
$500,000 to design security
I know
practices for some 4
This is
dozen
super
similar
close to me.
labs.
This GenSpace. It's like up the block.
You should go check it out.
Yeah, maybe I should go work.
Take some drone footage.
Yeah, got a new drone. Anyways, I think we've talked about this for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Is there another topic you want to cover in this field, or
In the
is there
field of
things you wanna
genetic
say?
editing and genetic engineering, I just think that there are two different. There are two different views that I will accept. The third, one of the other views being like Christians, the Christian view of we should do no whatever. I'm throwing that out. The religious view I throw out completely. It doesn't matter to me. But the scientific view of genetic engineering is like it's a public good that helps everybody. We shouldn't be afraid of it because it's highly regulated. The experiments are safe. They go by everything. And don't worry about GMO food. Don't worry about a lot of these things. Then there's the other view, which on the opposite side in terms of scientific view, which is there's not enough of X, Y, and Z thing done to make sure that they're all safe. And then the third view, which is like, even if everything is done safe and completely by the book and whatever, above board, commodifying genes is a difficult proposition for me to accept in the large scale of global economics. And like, where do we, like, how do you commodify something that is part of you?
Yeah.
It's weird.
That gets into a ethics problem that I think a lot of science fiction novels have covered in the past, like or novels and movies, like the movie Gattaca, or is it? Yeah, Gattaca deals with a lot of, way more advanced than what these guys are doing, but a lot of gene splicing therapy and things like that, and allowing you to alter your child's DNA before they're born in order to pick certain genes that are favorable. So that sort of gets into a lot of ethics problems, and is it really safe? Who knows, etc. But and
beyond that, with crops
GMOs, that's the next topic.
GMO crops, like whatever with GMOs in terms of how they infect the environment, but they are really, I don't think the GMOs, they can be really troublesome in terms of farming practices. Like farmers who don't plant GMO crops, but they get cross-pollinated by farmers who are next to them who have GMO crops, can be sued, and their crop can be possessed by the company who owns the patent on the GMO products, because of the cross-pollination, even though there's very little that people can do to prevent that kind of thing.
That being said, I definitely support a lot of GMO crops. I don't think that they're all bad. I definitely think that they're allowing to grow more food in less space and less resources are consumed. This
is what I'm talking about. This is a scientific point of view versus the economist or social science point of view, which is like, it might be a net benefit for food production, but it's a net negative for the farmers and farming practices and the economics of owning a patent on life. So farmers who do not participate in the genetic GMO foods are forced to later participate in GMO foods because of the risk of litigation against them.
Right. Okay. Well, I didn't know much about that, but...
And the old practice of being able to use part of the seed stock that you have from your year for the next year's crop in terms of planting them or whatever is not allowed because of the patents and how they work in terms of replanting and things like that.
Okay. Well, there's...
So in terms of agricultural farming practices,
yes, and it's a lot to get into.
It's part of the same thing. It's like the practice of genetic engineering isn't a bad thing in and of itself, but how it's applied or used or all of that is something that I think a lot of scientists overlook, because they're so focused on the argument that people are so afraid of GMO products because they can manipulate your body or whatever. Like, that's what I was saying. Scientists are like, it's like my parents who are chemists and biochemists and oncologists and whatever, like they're all for GMO foods without really thinking about the business practices that are part of GMO foods.
Well, when it becomes a product, everything is taken off the table, and it becomes like you have to factor in so many different things. So that's when ethics should take precedent over maybe the lives it's saving, maybe whatever it's doing, you know. So is it really ethical to screw someone like this farmer out of their crops and their livelihood because it's cheaper to and more beneficial to the farmers that are planting GMO crops, etc., things like that. So that I believe is a discussion for another day.
Yes, it is a long.
Hey, we finally got another topic in the. Now we can talk about GMO crops.
Discussion.
I agree, and I'd like to talk to you more about GMO crops, Ivan, because I do think that they're really interesting, and there's a lot of controversy from both sides about GMO crops and things like that. So definitely worth talking about. Hey, that's our stream there. But Ivan,
yo,
thanks for coming up with this topic here, DIY gene editing. I hope everyone in the chat and everyone watching this video or listening to this podcast found it at least a little bit educational, and maybe perhaps brought to light something that you might not have thought about in the past, you know, or maybe you're thinking about gene splicing yourself and you found this podcast. Who knows? Hopefully we've dissuaded you.
I had no idea that we were so close to getting it in the homes.
Exactly. So maybe we've dissuaded you from trying to do this, or maybe we persuaded you from trying to do this. But keep the conversation going in the chat below and in the comments section below, or tweet at us if you have any qualms with what we said, etc. We love to talk it out with you guys. I think keeping the conversation going is how things get done. So, Ivan, we end our podcast every single week in a song in a segment called Hungover Radio. This is where you, the viewer or listener, can send in your music as the music is playing outside. Perhaps a song that you wrote or produced, played an instrument on, etc., and you want some free advertisement, we will play it at the end of the podcast for your free advertisement, and perhaps maybe you get some more viewers or listeners on your own channel. That would be pretty cool. But today, Ivan, we have no one who sent in any song. It's not like that changed ever. We got one once. That was pretty cool. But I'll tell you, Ivan, I've got a song for you guys. We're going to be playing Battlefield from Super Smash Bros. Melee in honor of the Get On My Level 2018 tournament that's going on Twitch currently right now. So if you're watching this podcast live, you should go check that tournament out. There were some sick matches. I just saw Amsa get wrecked by Axe. Not wrecked, but it was a pretty good match, I'll tell you. He got sent to loser's bracket, so now he's got to work his way up. And hopefully, they do double elimination tournaments in Smash.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Usually the crowd favorite is Mango, who consistently, he's one of the top 5 Melee players.
Mm-hmm.
He consistently, without fail, every single tournament, he drops into loser's bracket within the top 32, and then just claws his way back out every single tournament. It's kind of crazy. He obviously does it on purpose now, but no, it's not obvious. But anyways, he's also insane. But I hope you guys check that tournament out, maybe through VODs, but definitely enjoy this song. Ivan, thanks so much for coming up with this topic. I learned a lot. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope the viewers learned a lot. So I'm Julien.
And I'm Ivan. Thanks so much. Bye.
See ya.